Hello, everyone. Good morning from England. A good afternoon from all the other parts of the world that my colleagues are and the attendees are based on. So on behalf of the Well-Read Book Club, I would like to welcome you all in our 8th discussion, in which we'll have the opportunity to share with you our views on some key points emerged from the Future Shaper book. A few months ago, I think it was pre-COVID, right? I think, 4 like-minded professionals, Trista, Rania, Andrea, and myself, we thought of creating a platform to reflect on some books of our interest so that we can learn from each other and share ideas and challenge our ideas, really. So here we are. We have created this lovely well-read international community of reading. For me, it's more of sharing with colleagues and learning from each other anyway. Okay, I think a little bit of introduction would help. I am Maria Caparu here. I'm an academic at the University of Southampton in England, and I will coordinate the discussion today. Andrea, you want to go next?
Hi everyone, I'm Andrea. I'm in Sydney. It is Friday evening, 9 o'clock. It's been a great week. We've had 2 days of sunshine, which has been amazing for us, even though we're usually, expecting a lot more sun. But yeah, so welcome everyone. And I'm really excited just to be able to see you all and talk to you all about something we have all can have a chat about. So thanks.
Fantastic. Rania?
Rania Sawalhi, working and living currently in Qatar. It's a Friday noon. That's usually it's kind of our holiday weekend that we're starting, but it's nice to be with you because that would refresh our timing and give us kind of a motivational chat and discussions, wearing different hats, and we will mention some while we're discussing our book today. Trista.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Trista.
Hi, everyone. I'm Trista Hallwick. I'm here in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. It's 6 a.m. in the morning, which is actually a nice sleep in because normally these happen at 5 a.m., but daylight savings hasn't hit us just yet. I believe it's hit you, Andrea, so things have changed. It's coming for me. So I'm always happy to get up early and talk to my friends and to talk about leadership and education. Just shouting out to my background today, the Canadian Playful Schools Network, which is something I'm co-leading with a colleague and really, really proud of. So I'm thinking a lot about the CPSN as I think about this, the work from the book we read today. So I can't wait to dig in.
Excellent. We can't wait to hear your insights on that and reflections. So, okay, folks, we would also like to see where you are based at the moment. So please, can you please take a few seconds to use this link, this QR code, so that we can see where you are based? In the meantime, I can give some introductions. I can briefly introduce you to the book. So today we are discussing Future Shaper, How Leaders Can Take Charge in an Uncertain World by Niamh O'Keefe. I'm not sure whether I pronounced the surname in the correct way. So the author is a leadership advisor with a career track record of 24 years or more of experience in strategy consulting and executive coaching. Interestingly, this book was published, I think it was March 2020. Was it that month that the whole world has collapsed with the pandemic? I thought, oh, wow, this is very timely. Anyway, so the book basically suggests a future shaper framework and provides a practical guidance, a practical guide to help practitioners in various industries, I would say, not necessarily within the education sector, on how to navigate the leadership complexity. So I found it an interesting read, and timely, to engage with books and practical resource literature, really discussing the complexity of leadership in a world of an ongoing uncertainty. So it was an interesting read for me. Any other thoughts from my colleagues, from my friends?
I'll just jump in to say that I think, thinking of this is our 8th session, it was interesting that we've been reading a lot of books about like ourselves and how we are, like the way of being, if I could pull it that way. And then this one sort of shifted to that practicality that you talked about, Maria, but also how the other books all fit in to this idea and the way of being sort of unfolded. So that was one thing for me.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. Any other thoughts from anyone else?
Well, I was going to
Just the
say,
first thought.
actually, when I was reading it, I'm thinking, okay, I knew a lot of the things. Do you know what I mean? Nothing to me sort of went, oh, wow, I've never thought of that. Everything was sort of more like telling me that what I knew was, reinforcing what I'd seen, what I'd known, what I'd read about. But I think, the business part of it was a little bit new for me to look at that lens. Some of the wording I struggled with, but I sort of thought as a business person, it might need that sort of language. But I thought it was a great book to reinforce some of the things I'd already read and seen. But you're right, it's more a practical approach.
But I also I agree with you, Andrea. I also like the business perspective, and it was a good reminder to me when I read that book back in 2020, when I felt that the whole world has collapsed. So it was, I have had the chance to see, okay, how can we lead in these uncertainty times, and it was a reminder. I have learned some new things, but of course, we all know that, leading an organization has always been challenging. So I thought, oh, so what makes that future leader, shaper, intelligence framework, sorry, I tried to remember how it's called, appealing, what makes it different? So I think, well, in the past, things were a little bit more easier to predict, to some extent, but I think nowadays, change can happen faster, in a very, at a very alarming pace. So I thought this book will add to and it has contributed to my understanding of things.
It's interesting, really, Maria, regarding how she called the book Future Shapers, and used the word of uncertain, because at that time we did not expect how uncertain it will be, the uncertain world.
Exactly.
So, and even, having for COVID or having for different things, to what extent that it had affected all sectors. And everyone was overwhelmed, regardless of, she started her part 1 of leadership overwhelming, and how exhausting it is to be a leader, regardless of who are we going to define going to be a leader, or who are leaders. I like the part 2 when she discussed about empowering yourself, because usually when we talk about empowering, that we expect someone else to come and help us. But she emphasized that don't wait for permission. Sorry. It always happens, like when I start, like don't wait for permissions and start even to finding your role. So future shapers, it might be had already started today or yesterday. It might be that we are cautious for this, or we're just working, but we don't know to what extent that this is going to shape the future for us and for others. And that's something within the model that she had presented within the fundamental keys, 5 keys, and also for the people that did not read the book, each letter, the abbreviations for future shapers goes for a concept or let's say a tip.
A trait, I think it's called.
Traits that she's emphasizing, and we might go through them. But something that I will start as a quote from page 35, when she mentioned that for her, leaders are like parents. When someone would be called a parent, does not mean that he's a good or a bad parent. And that's something we need to think about. Who are we calling leaders? And are they bad or good? So we don't have this kind of false expectations or, like generalizing whatever that are in this position or are aiming to be influencing others, how we can move it forward. Yeah, so the book is divided into those 3 parts and taking us into journey. For me, I totally agree with what you had mentioned. I didn't have this kind of feeling that she added much as describing and going through. And I might add kind of tips or expectations that other books would take it into consideration. Thanks.
I was interested as we think about it, because you're right, the uncertain world was in 2020 March that they were reflecting against. And so I had some questions, does this hold still? And also the idea that's being, it has been long in the business world for quite a while, the idea of the VUCA context, right?
Yeah.
So volatile, uncertain, complexity, and ambiguity, VUCA, and thinking, like, I was surprised that wasn't considered or brought in at all. And I kept thinking, like, it's in the business world. This is something where I heard this through some of those sessions that I'd been in prior. And this is kind of how we are now, right? It is volatile and uncertain and ambiguous and complex. So I was fascinated that wasn't brought into this conversation as well.
I agree, Trista, because that's the first thing that came to my head was VUCA, and I'm like, what does that acronym stand for again?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's been so long.
Exactly.
But yeah. I looked at the organizations part of it, where it was page 11, where they say integrate competition and cooperation in innovative and unexpected ways, and they need each other in order to survive. So it's shifting that competition with other companies, but you're actually working together a little bit more and cooperative. So yeah, that was interesting that's this sort of approach, and I wonder how that's moving forward.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks for moving that to the next slide, because we can, now we can start sharing our views on what has, stood out for us from this book. So who would like to go first? I can do.
Yeah, go.
Yeah. Again, I will start talking about, when I read the book, seriously, I mean, we have all experienced that thing that the whole world was spinning out of control. I felt that it's out of our control at that point of time. And I was wondering, okay, how come that book, was published when the whole world started collapsing? Anyway, that might have been a coincidence. Anyway, so everything looked very, very complicated back then. And yes, we have all experienced a lot of uncertainty. So reading that book made me feel, that, okay, I'm not the only one who is experiencing, is expecting what it's mentioned here to follow a spaghetti-shaped planning. That's how it's called here. So I thought, okay, this might be the end of an era of, creating that, having leaders who are creating a 5-year or a 10-year plan, with goals, setting out strategies well in advance, and so on and so forth. So it reminded me that the only thing which remains or should remain at the heart of a leader's attention is the vision. So, and how to rethink our strategies and reimagine, how we operate our programs, our departments, and so on and so forth. Certainly, I do agree with what it says in the book, that priority is fast losing its currency. So when everything else we're doing, it seems to be urgent. And it wasn't only, I mean, I don't know about you ladies, colleagues, but I feel that this has always been the problem with me, like managing time, setting priorities, and so on and so forth. Everything seems to be urgent and so on. So it was a good reminder that we have to keep resetting priorities, refocusing, and changing our plans. And especially during the the first lockdown, we have had to have at least 2 backup plans, you know, and as we all said, this is not really new information for us who are holding a leadership position or who have studied leadership and so on and so forth. But looking back at the pandemic times, I think that the pandemic made us, you know, be more resilient and try to be more persistent and, you know, accept and working on the obstacles that we are facing and so on. So in this book, I like some of the practical guidance and advice that is given with regard to how we can identify the progress blockers to control as much as we can, you know, the situation, and also turn the situation or ourselves into you know, the shaper of our futures. Anyway, so these are some of the, and I also like the idea of the intrepidness. It's not an idea, it's a concept about, you know, how that we need to appreciate the failure as part of our learning process and journey. And this is something that, you know, if you like, I would like to discuss.
Can I actually jump in on that, just that question?
I was just yeah,
Because I'd love, did you notice in the book when it said, when you learn from mistakes and that failure, and then the caveat was this is more common in the US than in Europe. And it's a question I wanted to bring. I'm like, look at this. Okay, let's look here. I want to know, like, do you think that was a fair statement? So I can speak from a Canadian perspective. I think like learning through mistakes and the whole growth mindset and education push has been all about learning through mistakes. But you know, that's always been for me one of the ways I work. Like we are going to make mistakes is 100% likely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what are you learning from it? And that's where a lot of really interesting surprises and the unpredictability can turn into preferables from that. So for the
But it's how we respond to these mistakes that really
how we
matters.
respond. But I just wanted to know if it's part of the leadership for you. So just on your framework of in Australia and in Qatar and England, is that, what did you think when you read that?
Look, personally, I'm thinking, is this because I've been in education, right? So I'm thinking, is it because we've got that lens of education where we tell students, you learn from your failures, from your mistakes, and that's fine. And teachers, if we model that. So my headspace was, I actually looked at the references because I'm thinking, how old are we drawing on? Because I was like, where's Brené Brown with the courage and the, you know, that's why I looked at it and I'm thinking the references were a little bit older, and I'm wondering if it was written earlier. And I'm thinking, do I have bias? Well, I don't know if it's bias, but a different lens because I'm in education. So that was my thing. But yeah, I think I wouldn't say I've lived in America. I've lived in North America for 15 years. I wouldn't say I could stand by that statement as in I didn't notice. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. What about you, Rania?
No, I would say that won't rely on education or other sectors as much as the mindset of the people that they're working. So in many Arab countries, and I can generalize that even failure for teachers are not accepted and they're not able to model that for students. And this is one of the arguments that I continuously say. If you're not supporting teachers and if you're not allowing them to try and to learn from their mistakes, how are they going to help and, you know, to model or to show that for students? And that was, if my colleague would be listening to this recording afterward, she was surprised when her VP met the coordinators in the school, and she was telling them, as coordinators, you're not allowed to do mistakes. So we were shocked, you know, having this conversation. From where did she come from that? She's in school, you know, like for God's sake, she's okay. We're not talking about mistakes that would harm students or parents or communities. We're talking about trying things and error and something that might be less priority or something could be developed. And this is the conversation or chat. But having kind of mindset of an education and in school in specific, that's something everyone need to reflect and to see to what extent that we really encourage others to learn and show that this is part of the learning journey that we're having. So I don't think it's more about the culture, it's more about the context than the sector. And even for international schools or expats that's coming to this region, sometimes they're also afraid to make mistakes because of the current political issues or the job security or many things that would affect them. So this is a really interesting concept also to go through. But let me start with the first thing. You know, when I started with chapter 1, I was a little bit confused. Is she talking about leadership or she's talking about management? Because
Yeah.
being overwhelmed, that I won't just say it's more about leadership as much going to administration side or managerial side or different aspects than just only focusing on leaders and followers. And when she's talking about being overwhelmed, I think leaders, when regardless of their as position, formal position or non-formal or non-positional leadership, that also would encourage them because this is something that they are influencing others and they know the consequences of doing that. I like the idea how she emphasized about disrupt or being disrupted. And I think this is something COVID had taught us clearly, although that many had been discussing this in leadership and age of disruption, etc. Steve Jobs had lots of models about that and the techniques and this kind of leadership model, if we will say. But in education, we were more kind of traditional, you know, like the types of schooling, the types of teaching and learning, the methods, the ways that even we're discussing. But the shift that had happened during a very quick time, early COVID, that allowed us even to accelerate what we're thinking and what we're also showing. And that's just a quick answer. So it's not mainly about the sector, it's more about the culture and the people themselves.
Yeah, I agree with all of you, especially with the mindset, but also I think it's more how we respond, we respond to the failure, and how the systems themselves, you know, the systems that we operate, that and the structures really within the organizations allow employees, allow practitioners to respond to this mistake. So, are we focusing on judgmental, you know? Structures or developmental structures when we're dealing with people who have, or students who do have, you know, consistent failures in their performance or in their outcomes and so on. What are the systems that what is the mechanism that we activate to support them? So yeah,
Can I just throw out that psychological safety then, Rania? You're saying that would be not available to a lot of people, that psychological safe spaces to make mistakes that Amy Edmondson talked about?
Yep, that would go best, first of all, for the person perspective about their role and expectations from others. And I told my colleague, for example, you need to sit with her and you need to go through her values and expectations, because this is not kind of the management or the leadership that should be in place. The other thing is just looking at others and supporting them. So it's not babysitting them, but at the same time, providing them with clear direction, tools, resources. And she mentioned this within the book. And having this kind of discussion and safe to come back. You know, I used to tell my teachers and senior leaders, you know, even if you do mistake, come to tell me, I will support you, but I need to know what's happening. So, you know, this kind of discussion, and I keep telling them, you know, like, I'm responsible, so don't worry about that, but just let me know the whole picture. Let me know what's happening, so I will find solution. But if I hear it from someone else and I would not know how to react and how to work on solving the issue, so I won't be able to support you fully. So even for myself, if I do something, you know, like would have a severe consequences, I would go to my direct manager and say, okay, take a deep breath. I'm telling you what's happening. I'm trying to solve it, but I'm in charge. You know? Now, even if someone else would be feeling afraid, that would take us to the F word, you know, like I liked when she differentiated between the F word, the F letter within the future shapers, like when she differentiated between fearless and courage, you know, even not having the feeling of being, you know, being afraid of something. I think this is a very advanced level. I'm not so sure if we had been there, you know, to start something without any kind of this, you know, feeling, but at least to encourage others to have this kind of discussion and to start discussing and sharing their perspectives, concerns, and how we can all overcome. So yes, we definitely need this kind of safe, positive, encouraging environment, and also to help others to adapt, because if you're coming from a different culture, there are different procedures, systems, ecosystems, and she mentioned this, I think, in page 10 or early in the book, about the idea of developing ecosystems for everyone to be involved and to be part of, developing their skills and working together.
I'm doing a lot of work right now around social network analysis. And I know, Maria, that was something you and I had explored together in one of those research methods sessions we did. I love that idea, right? And the network keeps coming up in this book.
Yeah.
Networks mentioned, and so building on what Rania is talking about, how we're all connected. So it is that ecosystem, and all of these members are either really, really central, or they're sort of working on the outside and how do you have that reciprocal connection across? And this idea for me, and I know you've all heard me talk about it, but the sense of accompaniment and supporting one another, but it really is about being well held. Like, how do we know? And that doesn't mean that it's permissive. It doesn't mean that we are just letting things slide. And I was listening to a podcast. I don't know if you listened to the one, We Can Do Hard Things. Glennon Doyle and Amy, do you listen to that? Anyway, so they were talking
You can share
about
it with us, please.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
it's pretty much a lot of the North America is listening to that podcast anyway. So, but in it, one thing really struck me the other day is this idea that it's a carefrontation. So because you really care and with someone, and so how you manage conflict, it's the like, do you really care about the outcome and the person? And is that embedded in this discussion? So that accountability gets a lot of like negative terms, but we are moving forward. And as Rania says, like, you do need to have feedback around things. I need to know what's happening. It can't be a secret or a surprise. Like, we need to be talking about it. So the carefrontation piece is how we move together, but you're still feeling well held, that you are like, I have your best interest, but we need to move together. And I think that's a really important element of the leader, and the leader really does hold it together. They should be at the key center. And I want to highlight one of the things that really stood out for me, the quote, wherever possible, hire people better than you, be fearless about this.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, if we want sustainability, if we want to have our systems and systemic change, we as leaders, if we're thinking around a social network component where everybody is attached, who are your people that are better than you, and how do you support them so they're ready for that position? Because it's not like you just plunk people into stuff, even the best people. It's, that overwhelm, and it's just so much. So how do we make sure that we're supporting them? Hiring really great people and not being afraid of giving them opportunities to shine. And then I was just stepping back and thinking, like, is this new form of leadership? Is this historic leadership? And you know how she comes up with those charts of, it's always been in place. There always been people doing this work that have disrupted, who have changed the world. But I just feel like I'm not sure that that's the case still, that people are really celebrating those within the system. Sorry, Andrea, go. You've got something to say. I can see it. And
Andrea, yes. Go ahead.
It was about when you was the moment before you said about in the environment and how we want feedback. But on page 42, researchers are now discovering that character traits respond dynamically to your environment, your education, your thoughts, and your beliefs. But I think that environment is really, really important. So what are you doing as a leader to create that environment where you are, taking risks and you feel like you can shine with your strengths, and not feeling like, oh, I don't want to overshadow anybody else. That's what I was thinking. So,
coming back to your points, I would say that within the education sector, we have always, as practitioners, we have always experienced having some people that we have been turning to ask for advice, for guidance, support, and so on. Sometimes these people are within our organization, some other times are outside the organization, and this doesn't, it's not related to any hierarchy or positional authority, and so on and so forth. I like the idea of again, it was a reminder for me. The author spoke about a platform, like power up your network and multiply the impact that you can have. So yes, especially in the education sector, yes, we do build, our capacity to access and reach out to people, other people who can provide some support, who can be great mentors, coach, and so on and so forth. But what I started questioning myself is whether and to what extent the leaders within the education sector make themselves more visible and approachable to make, our own voices heard, but also to create a platform where colleagues feel a high level of trust to talk to their leaders and discuss problems, discuss, problematic situations, and so on and so forth, without experiencing fear, and being judged by poor or weak progress or performance, and so on and so forth. So again, it goes back to the point about whether we focus on judgmental or developmental, structures and opportunities.
Yeah, I would share, kind of two, I won't say stories, cases that I faced or I heard about. The first one was personally in 2010 when I worked with a CEO. When you used to have a problem or face a challenge within the school, and we go and say that we tried this, but it didn't work, he would just simply look at me and say, are you convincing me that you have 200 teachers in the school and you could not find a solution? So there is something wrong. Either that you did not enable them to voice, kind of suggestions, or to think freely, or to think differently, or. And that guided me within my teacher leadership dissertation, because that's part of how are we encouraging and enabling teachers to voice their experiences and to think out of the box to find other solutions. And I will always go back to, if we're talking about artificial intelligence, so we need, first of all, to talk about human intelligence. Are we really allowing them to lead the artificial intelligence, or we're just stepping back and saying, yeah, this is what the machine and devices are going to guide us?
Yeah.
And the second case, or the incident, that when one of the leaders, she started, her position, and then she started trying to get away from some of the employees. And we were discussing, why are you doing this? Said, because I'm looking for a better one or a better candidate within the market. So I said, yes, but that's part of, kind of induction, skilling. There's a need kind of getting into the mood or understanding the concept or the culture or what's required from them. We can't just say within the first week, unless, once again, there's a clear harm or there's something clearly wrong about their kind of performance or working within this environment. But if we're helping person to adapt and to understand the vision, that goes back to how we, either in the education or the business or different sectors, we're helping building the team. And this is something that she really emphasized within the book. To what extent we are, as educators, helping and sharing ideas, networking, and giving tools so that people can, won't say adapt, but at least get into the mood quickly to understand, because change isn't easy. Even if this person has a long history or a great history of working and achievements, they would need a stage or a phase that they would understand what they're going through and the new requirements or the new job or the new place or the new country, or just name it.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether we do have the answer, but we can always discuss about this question. And
not looking for answers, Mariam,
yes,
just sharing.
Exactly.
Could
You
we
see,
talk-
with the high level, I think we have all experienced, and we are experiencing a high level of competition. So the level of cooperation within a competitive environment can be debatable, in my view. So yeah.
I'd like to
Tristan,
jump in. Yeah, I was thinking, now you just got me thinking on another path, but I'm gonna go back to the as it happens, like all those things right in your head that you're like, oh yeah, and this, yeah. I wanted to talk about the influence piece, if that's possible. It's a bit of a shift, but you know how she talks about, so it's building influence is not a transactional event. It is a journey of 1,000 mindful steps.
yeah.
And so it was clear, right? Influence was really important in being a future shaper, that is a key element, that you need to have that sense of influence to make the change. But I also was taking a pause and thinking about it, like how welcome, like edu influencers are not well received right now. Like they're, so what do we mean by this? And those 1,000 mindful steps, like really, what are they? And when you get too much, at least in the field of education, it feels there's a lot of pushback, there's a lot of questioning. And I just wanted to raise it here, your perspective on meaningful or like purposeful, strategic almost influence versus like maybe earned. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. What are your thoughts?
Well, I actually took down page 141. Doing favors will naturally flow back to you, or that you can hope to draw on specific needs arise in the future. Try to be natural and don't use reciprocity in too calculated way. I was thinking about that because I thought, I try and help people, and then you sort of get messages or phone calls when they're needing something, but you might not hear from them for a year. And I remember my first principal said, Andrea, things will always come back. Whatever you put out there, things will always come back. And I always remember that. So I keep doing that. I keep checking in on people. But sometimes I think in education, there is that bit of like influences. It's a bit of a tightrope, really. You've got to balance it, I think. Yeah.
And the competition. I mean, it's there.
Yeah.
But this is the key challenge. That's why I said earlier, within a competitive environment, how do we cooperate with colleagues when we all want to make sure that we have, we are competitive, we achieve
meeting
good
your
results, for
benchmarks,
example.
which is, yeah.
Yeah, and and how also we convince people to follow a leader, or whether and how we are convinced as practitioners to follow a leader who might not really have leadership skills. Leadership is about, and Rania mentioned earlier about, whether she's talking about manager or leader and so on and so forth. A leader needs to inspire and influence people, and build capacity, and so on and so forth.
I think that Maria would take us to the resources that we're providing them. This is something that she mentioned about hardworking, which I disagree with. So it's not about hardworking as much as smart working.
Smart working, yeah, I agree.
So we need also to make it easier for everyone. There's a difference between commitment, and there's a difference between, you're dedicated, you're doing what's required. But also we need to think about education and the role of educators, teachers, whoever, that we need to simplify it and make it more easier for everyone to do their task or to do their job, to focus more on the human, to focus more on the students, the learners, and even for teachers themselves. We're talking about well-being and different aspects. But regarding the word that she used a lot, and now you refer to as convincing, I was asking myself in that chapter, are we really in the need of convincing others? Because leaders, they don't convince, leaders, they just simply influence others.
You inspire, you influence, exactly.
So it's not about sitting and telling and forcing them to be convinced. I didn't feel like this is the right word to be used, or the right approach even to be, and that does not mean that we're not going to communicate the vision or to clarify what's expected, or just to share the ideas to come to maybe a third alternative, but at least to have this kind of communication instead of telling them and convincing them of one approach. So that was something I felt sometimes in the book. There's kind of contradiction between the
Yeah.
words or the ideas. So I was going back, how this is linked or how this is the flow of the ideas or the structure.
Well, the terms leader and manager are interchangeably used in books and in research, in academic literature as well. So I'm not sure whether the way that these words are used, in the book is the right way. Anyway, especially when it comes to inspiring people and building followership, because building followership, for example, is linked to a leader's role, and inspiring colleagues and so on and so forth. But building followership is beyond positional authority, because as Professor Tony Bush says, leadership is independent of positional authority, if you see what I mean. So it's more about empowering. It's more about empowerment and creating better structures and shared decision making.
The trait I was sort of looking for, because I'd spoken to another friend leader last week, and we talked about how much we value humility these days. So when you talk about influences and confidence, there's also that balance of humility, which I really value. And this person just said, one thing he really valued was leaders who are humble and walk beside you and still build you up and building your capacity, but you feel that there's this reciprocity of respect, which I would have loved that to have heard that a little bit more. I don't know.
That's so important. And I wonder if there's an element of tension here between, this is supposed to be a practical book.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm thinking about it. And I go back to we've all said, it's nothing really too new. If you've been in this field, and I mean, we all have for a couple decades or so. But, this, we've been thinking a lot about this, reading a lot about, Aranya and I are spending a lot of time thinking about women, educational leadership. And so, this is obviously in our space of thinking, but there's a tension around when the way some leaders are, when you're thinking about that what it is, when you think about these people that they've got listed in the book, what it is that they are, and then how to do it. So if you're actually trying to help people move towards that, but then I think there's that tension, like it can't seem too stilted or like strategic, because that feels unauthentic to me. That, like if you're only building a network so that you can have the network rather than actually valuing the people and not knowing if it's going to be reciprocal or not, going back to what Andrea said, that if it feels strategic to me, when someone reaches out, I'm like, I don't know about this, right? But there are ways of being. So I don't know, there's a tension there for me, like the how to do it step-by-step piece to be a future shaper versus what unfolds based on failures, based on your previous experiences, and based on how you are, and all the things that you think about. Okay,
I agree. That's an interesting point that you're raising. As far as I remember, the majority, if not all, of the cases of the leaders that we looked at in this book, they are people like they're CEOs or top leaders in business, entrepreneurship, technology, and so on and so forth. So yes, they are well placed to be future shapers of their worlds. Anyway, so they do have that positional authority and power, if you like, and power to influence others, and also influence to some extent the circumstances. So they definitely have, and I think this is mentioned in the book, they have access to the window of power or something like that. Now how they use that access to the people it would be interesting for us to find out, I think.
Yeah, I have many
big-
comments just to go through them. I will start with the one that you shared about Bush comments. And I will also echo what Alma Harris, Prof. Alma Harris had mentioned about, we might not prefer to use leadership when we talk about teacher leadership, because we need to emphasize that it's more about teacher influence more than the followers aspect, because that's not the case in teacher leadership. So there are lots of things and components that we need to be careful about, you know, the followers and convincing and authority or power or those kind of aspects. And also going back to the cases that she mentioned within the book, I was really hoping to find something unique that would aha moment, or someone that it's not overused or over mentioned in other books or other places, or at least to have a different perspectives about going through the case or the story or the ideas that had been shared, you know, within the book. But that depends on how we see, you know, sometimes for us it might be familiar, but for others they might not have gone through those kind of examples or cases, and that might inspire us to have a kind of list of cases or stories, so that we add or share, or people would get to know from different aspects of either students, maybe teachers, CEOs, or, you know, different kind of impact. And you will be surprised when I used to ask this question for my students, give me something that shaped your future, kind of invention or something, and the stories or the things that they would select sometimes would be really surprising, because, you know,
Would love to hear more about it.
Yeah, we might
Is it
have
ever about people, or is it always about things?
both.
Good
So
point.
something that had really affected or influenced either by a person who had done something, or a thing that they are continuously using. And when they are talking about simple inventions, maybe related to women's monthly or daily life, you know, sometimes something that we might not think that it had really affected, but at that time, or because we're continuously using, we take it for granted. But if you see it like 50 or 70 years ago, they didn't have this kind of luxury or the things that we're able to have in our lives now. So when they select those kind of examples, and sometimes I would just say, oh my God, I never thought about it. And it's really interesting, inspiring. For your comment, just as for a practical book, do we expect that they will give us kind of a step-by-step something? I find that maybe they can provide kind of tools, but to have something that would fit for every single situation that even myself might face, it might not be, it might restrict me more than helping me, or, you know, empowering me. And the last thing I liked within the traits that she had mentioned is about energizing. I found this really kind of, are we helping others? Are we following those kind of things? Or sometimes we're just, you know, simply acting and falling into drama, or complaining, or, you know, that we're overwhelmed with the details or day-to-day kind of issues that we're facing. So sometimes we might need to focus more on energizing ourselves and others in different ways, either that what she mentioned or more than that. But this is something maybe we can take out of this session, to have a list of the things that would energize us and energize our teams, our people around us. So something that Andrea, for example, is doing kind of a chat, or the call out or checking on us, you know, that's really energizing. So thank you everyone for doing that.
Thank you as well.
Yeah, you were always doing the background for this group chat, aren't you, Rania? You're always checking up on us, putting things out, checking the slides,
Keeping us on.
we appreciate you, Rania.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Did you notice on, so if you look on page 208, and I know throughout the book there are different cases that were suggested, but I was a little shocked at how few women were in the list, and also where most of the leaders were located in North America, in particular the US. I mean, there's some others, but it struck me because, you know, I was wondering, you know, what is, as we talk about Future Shaper, is this a new for it? Pardon me? Go ahead.
No, sorry.
was this a new form of leadership, or is this something that's been ongoing? Is it a disruptive form? Is it transformative? You know, where does it fit in the discussion? And just so yeah, that's kind of what pulled out, but I was a little surprised by the
I think we've all
location
got that lens. I think we all had that. I did look for that as well, and it's just that I'm more aware of it. But as I said, I could have seen this written 10 years ago. Do you know what I mean? I feel like we've come a long way to share stories of more women who have got a lot of influence, and other people as well, not just from that sort of region, right?
Yeah, but I mean, women have been underrepresented in senior leadership positions for, well, for a long time. And we would have hoped that things, you know, are changing over time, but it seems that they're not changing. And it seems that we will be missing a voice again in decision making, you know, a voice coming from women when it comes to decision making at that high level of decision making.
or are women getting it done and they're just not being recognized? You know, like who is taking the credit for a lot of this work? I mean, when you look at a lot of these folk on the list, I'm sure they're not by themselves working away and just like solo. There's usually, you know, to have such a change, and I'm pretty sure there's some women involved in that. But who ends up with in the end talking? I'm just throwing it out there, just, you know, so it might happen sometimes.
Yeah.
I do think it's a little bit of responsibility for women to shine light on other women. So
Yeah.
I spoke to somebody last week and I think she's amazing. So, and I said, we need to get your work out there. How can I support you? How can I help you? Now, this person is not unknown, but I just feel like she's unknown to certain people, and I want, you know, so I feel like we have to pay it forward a little bit. If other people have supported us, like I know I've been supported by a large amount of women, I think it's time, you know, that we also recognize that there are other up and coming people who might need a little bit of support as well.
Yeah,
So
absolutely agree.
it lies with us a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not holding my breath for other people to you know, to shine the light on women.
We need this, you know, we need a strong mechanism of support, you know, supporting each other, coaching each other. And also when somebody is at a position of, you know, being at a position to spot a person with potential, you know, a person who can have an influence, an influential voice. We need to support those women. I mean, alongside men, of course, but now we're focusing on the female part, because well, what I have experienced is that I know many people who are many men who are holding a senior leadership position, while women are holding middle leadership positions. And these are the middle leaders are really doing a lot of work, and they are key influencers at the operational level, obviously. And you know, and they make you know, they make change happen within their organizations.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Rania, you have something to say.
Yeah, well, it just takes me back, Trista, to the model that we presented in our upcoming book that will be published soon. But it's just the idea of empowering, and this is something had been mentioned, empowering ourselves. The other thing is about storytelling, because we don't share stories. And sometimes we just take it that this is something simple that we always do. But we need also to celebrate those kind of simple moments or simple achievements. We see them simple, but for someone else, it would be, oh my God, how did you do this? And that will take us also to the modeling and helping others. So at least if each one of us would support one lady per month or one lady per year. So this is something that will help many to be on board and to be involved. And then if we reach to the ecological kind of leadership and systems and approaches, that would even leverage or take it more advanced. But I'm really emphasizing the issue of storytelling, and I keep, you know, just sharing with my children, my colleagues, just share stories, just tell us what you have done. You know, this is something that would help us. It's not of the idea that you would feel this is something I can do myself, but even with the times of failure or the times of facing something difficult and how you have dealt with this would encourage me even more, because knowing about those details or backstage scenes, that would give us more influence and insights of how to do things and what's expected.
And just piggyback on that, Rania, because on page 198, it says, find your tribe, collaborate with the other like-minded future shapers. If you find and build your tribe, this will build your leverage for achieving shared preferables. Think about the people you consider to be the expert and who you trust and admire. So I just wanted to say that one, that to me speaks volumes to the group I associate myself with and reach out to and hopefully support as well. So thanks.
I love that component. I always just want to raise in North America and in Canada, we do have, I'm a little reticent to use the term tribe in this sense due to, and there's a lot of pushback on the use of that term. And so for me, it is about your community, where you belong. And so I agree absolutely wholeheartedly, Andrea, but then whenever I see that word, I'm like, oh, so for me, that's always.
Can we create our own word then, Trista?
I think we should.
Yes, yes.
I think we should.
Absolutely.
That's our challenge for all of us, to come up with a word of support for
the community,
others.
belonging, empowering, the shout out, the storytelling, and sharing our stories together. Okay.
But not another acronym.
Not enough.
I was just going to say, are we going to
acronym.
have another acronym, beside Will Read? Or
Lovely.
Right. Okay, I'm checking the time. Right, I'm a bit cautious about the time. So personally, I wouldn't expect to read a groundbreaking, research in this book. Obviously, yes, it's more of a practical guide, which I think it can inform people at an early stage of their leadership, career. And it was a good reminder for some of us who have more experience in leadership and so on. I like the last, I think I put it on the slides, or not, I'm not sure. Page 179, it says, the super adaptable future shaper is constantly horizon scanning to anticipate what is around the next corner or the next timeline. And we need to assess if any plans need to change accordingly. So, and it seems that many things change over time, especially in these challenging times. So, future leaders need to be adaptable and obviously forward thinkers, and creating that dynamic within their organization. Sorry, I know that, what time is it? Sorry, 2 minutes, and I have another meeting, I'm afraid. So any questions, any contributions from anybody else?
No, for me, just excited to continue these conversations, and I'm glad that we are continuing. It's so
Likewise, yeah.
I really love connecting. I probably should get a new profile pic since I'm no longer a brunette.
And I'm sure that we also, the way that we connect and chat about it, share, the kind of ideas, examples from different cultures and different continents and different backgrounds. I think this is adding even more for the just, reading and an ordinary discussion for a book. So thank you, ladies, and thank you everyone who have joined us.
Thank you so much.
Watch this.
And stay, please, in our diaries now, our next well-read discussion will be on the 3rd of February. So please put presents, is it? Yes, in our reading list.
Yay.
Thank you all for joining us today, and good day and good evening, everyone. Take care.
Yay.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.